Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Samantha. Today I'm going to show you how to make this Dreidel drawstring gift bag. It is a simple beginner project. It takes only 1/3 yardage of fabric to make. This party favorite bag will make a fun gift idea for the Hanukkah holiday to give away to family, friends, neighbor, or co-workers. This will also make a great community gift giving project to the elderly. I'm so excited to share with you my first pattern from my shop. So let's get started. Let's first go over the supply you will need. You will of course need the pattern. You can order this from my shop. A link will be listed in the description below. A pair of scissors, two 20-inch drawstring, or you can use ribbon, two decorative beads. This is optional. Just make sure the hole in the bead is large enough to feed the drawstring or the ribbon. You will need tracing paper and tracing stylus. Next, let's talk about the fabric. You can use cotton, cotton blend, linen, or satin. Or if you choose to find a lightweight fabric that you like, along with the satin, make sure you use interfacing to help keep the shape of the bag. For the fabric, you will need 1/3 yardage if you are choosing to use only one color throughout the pattern. Now, if you choose to use two or more contrasting fabric, you can look at the combination yardage in the instructions. The seam allowance will be 1/4 of an inch. Okay, everyone, let's take out your booklet and let's look at the first instruction page. In the first step, it tells you to trace the applique design onto the fabric so that you can create an applique that can be hand stitched, like this bag. You can also create an iron-on applique that can be machine stitched. You can also embroider the Hebrew letters. And finally, you can hand paint or spray paint the Hebrew letters by creating a stencil. You are the artist, and it's entirely up to you. For this tutorial, I have chosen to hand paint the Hebrew letters. Okay, finally, let's get to making this bag. Okay, so the next step is to sew the blocks in this order: sheen, hay, gimbal, and noon. So we're going to take the sheen and the hay, we're going to put the right sides together, and we're going to sew those together. Then we're going to take the gimbal and the noon, and we're going to put the right sides together, and then we're going to sew those two down as well. After we sew these pieces down, you're going to iron down the seams. Then you're going to put these two pieces right sides together. And you're going to sew the hay and the gimbal together. Okay, so now that we have this sewn together, we're going to go ahead and iron down that final seam. And this is what your pattern should look like. In order, you're going to have sheen, hay, gimbal, and noon. Now let's move on to the next step, or our next page. In the next step, we're going to take our bottom and we're going to sew the bottom to the sides, matching each point to each seam. So it's going to be this bottom part right here. And then we're going to take the right side, and then we're going to place right side to right side. And we're going to really start with the noon, even though the instructions actually start with sheen. So it's like you're going to be reading the Hebrew. So you're going to place this, of course, right side together. And at every point, it's going to match up to each seam. So you're going to sew, and then when you get to the seam, you're going to pivot. and then you're going to sew across, and then you're going to pivot again. Now also you can clip when you get to the stopping point. You're going to clip this piece, not this piece, so that it can make your pivot easy. And then of course you sew across, and then when you get to this seam, you're going to snip and then pivot. Okay, so now that we have it sewn, the bottom to the sides, this is what your pattern should look like. You're going to open up your seams and make sure you iron those down really well. Next, the next step says to fold in half, sew along the open side where the sheen and noon side meets, down to the bottom. So here's the noon, here's the sheen, and so you're going to place edge to edge, seam to seam, and then you're going to sew this down. Okay, so now that we got this sewn down, we're going to open our seams and iron down really well. We're going to turn this bag inside out. Now this is what it should be starting to look like. And the next step, it says we're going to take pattern B, and we're going to fold down each side with wrong side touching. So it's this. So we're just basically going to fold this over 1/4 of an inch. We're going to iron it down, and then we're going to stitch this down. And we're going to do, remember, we need 2 of these. So for both pieces, you're going to do the same thing. Okay, so now that we have this sewn down, we can move on to our next page. And so the next step is we're going to fold the wrong sides together. So basically we're just going to fold this in half. And then it says we're going to top stitch our drawstring pocket, and we can use our pattern guide. So we're going to take our pattern and we're going to line this up. We're going to fold that up over so that we can make sure it lines up. We're going to take our tracing paper and we're going to sandwich it in between the fabric and the pattern. We're going to get our stylus, and then we're going to trace our guide onto the fabric. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to top stitch this. And remember, we have 2, so you have to mark the second pattern as well. Okay, so we got these sewn down and we have it ironed down really nicely. Our next step says to line up pattern B to match up to 2 sides squares. Sew together, repeat for the second side. So basically, here's our 2 blocks, sheen and hay. And where this folds open, we're going to match that to 2 squares. And then we're going to sew that down. And then we're going to flip over and we're going to do the second side as well. So this part that opens up, we're going to sew to the top of this bag where the noon and the gimbal are. Okay, so now we have that sewn. Now, I want to tell you it is okay that it doesn't match directly next to the seam. That's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as we have it sewn to 2 squares. So we're going to make sure we iron it down, which is the next step. And so now we're getting closer to the end. And this is what your pattern or your bag should look like right now. Okay, so the next step is we're going to sew together our lining. Okay, so again, we're going to be moving on to our lining. So we're going to be cutting 2 of these pieces, and then we're going to sew this down. And of course, we're going to, once we get it sewn down, we're going to open it up and iron down our seams. Okay, so we got our 2 sides sewn together. And now, just like we did for the bottom of the outer shell of this bag, we're going to sew the bottom to this side. And again, we're going to start here. Excuse me. We're going to start here from this side. And we're going to go this way, again, like we're reading the Hebrew. Except for this time, there's no seam here and here to match. We only have this center seam here. So we need to make sure that this right here, this point here, it's going to match with this center seam. So we're going to sew, start our sewing off, and we're going to sew across, and then we're going to pivot, and then we're going to sew across, and this point is going to match up with your center seam here. And then we're going to continue to pivot until we sew this whole piece together. Okay, so I forgot to move on to the next page, but you can move on to the next instruction page. Now that we have this all sewn together, we're going to open our seams and we're going to iron the seams open. Excuse me. Next, once we get that done, we're going to fold in half where edge is touching edge and seam to seam. And then we're going to sew this down. Okay, so now that we got that sewn, of course, we're going to go back, we're going to open our seams, and then we're going to iron that down. All right, guys, we're getting closer and closer to the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this inside out, which is the next instruction. So we're going to turn both of these, but we already did this one. We already turned this one inside out. Now we're going to do that for the lining. I'm sorry, we have to go back this way. So we want the wrong side showing for this piece and the right side with the seams, the clean seams showing on the outside. Then we're going to take the lining and we're going to stick it inside of the outer shell. Now we do want this seam in the lining to match this seam in the outer shell of the bag. Okay, so it should look like this. And we want to make sure our flaps are inside. Okay. So now we're going to sew around. And we want to leave an opening here. So about 2 inches. There is a guide on your pattern showing you how much to leave open. So we're going to start from here. We're going to sew all the way around, and then we're going to stop here. So there's a little opening big enough for us to turn inside out. Okay, so now we have that sewn together. We're going to find our opening, which is here. And we're going to pull and turn inside out. And then we're going to push our lining in. Okay, and it should look like this. And then so our next step is we already did this, turn inside out, and now you guessed it, iron it down. Okay, so now that we have it ironed down, we're going to move to the next step, and it says to top stitch close to the seam where the drawstring pocket meets the side, and then iron the back down. So basically where the seam is, we're going to do a top stitch. And now as you're doing your top stitch, you do want to make sure you catch this opening and make sure that get top stitched as well as you're sewing around, so that because we do want that little hole to be closed up. All right, so we got our top stitch done, and we're going to check to make sure we caught the opening, and we did. So now it's all nice and clean looking. So now we can move on to our final page of instructions. So it says to cut 2 pieces of string measuring 20 inches each. So I went ahead and I done that. Now, if you feel like you want your string to be a little bit more than 20 inches, then by all means, go for it. Now, there's all types of different tools you can use that they sell at the fabric store to help you feed this through. I always resort to the safety pin. And so that's what I'm going to use today. So we're going to start from one end, and we're going to go between the little pockets that we created. And we're just going to feed our safety pin through. And we're just going to try to get it past that little fold. There we go. Now, if you feel like you pull too much or you're getting a little wild, all you have to do is just take a pin and tack this, pin it down so that you don't make a mistake in pulling it all the way out. So now we got it going through this one side. We're going to flip it over, and we're going to feed it through this side. Okay, and then we're going to remove our pin. Now at this point, if you have beads, this is where you're going to want to add your beads. So my ribbon may be too big to try to fit in here, but we can always try. Let's see. Oh, look at there. We got it. So you just pull your bead through, and then let's see, we're going to do this, and then we're just going to tie a knot. And also, if you, when you cut your string, you're going to want to make sure you burn the edges because we don't want this to unravel. Okay, so let's get our second 20-inch string. And we're just going to put our pin through. So remember, we started on this side and we fed the safety pin through this side, right? So this time we're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to feed it through this side. And again, remember, if you you have a fear of pulling too hard where you have to start all over, just pin this down to the body so that it doesn't go anywhere and just stays secure in place. All right. right, look at that. That one went through easy. And now we're going to flip over. And now we're going to put it through this side. And this one is a little bit, there we go. Oh, it went back in. There we go. And we're just gonna pull it a little more. And we're gonna take our safety pin off. Let's see if we can get this second bead through. Oh, it was easier than I thought. All right. So we're gonna just push that back just a little bit to give you some space to tie the knot, of course. All right. So now we are finished our drawstring bag. I'm going to put a little plastic bag in there so that we can see the shape. And then we're just going to pull it through. And now you have your Dreidel drawstring gift bag. Isn't that cute? I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your day to spend with me, making this Dreidel drawstring gift bag. I would love to see pictures of the bags that you've made and would also like to share with those who also would be interested. So please feel free to email me a picture to post on Instagram. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day or night. I'm looking forward in sharing many more patterns with you. See you later.